So I have what may sound like a weird idea, but back when I was a kid, we used to read these things called newspapers. So I thought I would go to a randomizer online, let it pick out a random date from the 20th century, and I would go find the newspapers of the day and tell you a story that they were talking about then that you've maybe never heard of. Before I go any further, don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon. All your support helps me to be able to do a bunch of goofy things like this. Also, like, subscribe, comment here. The Patreon is still a work in progress, but it will be updated more and much more frequently very, very soon, especially with all of your support. Okay, now to the randomizer, which spat out the date March 23rd of 1954. And on that date, the newspapers were all abuzz about college basketball, especially in what was college basketball's mecca at the time, Kansas City. Kansas City's Municipal Auditorium has still hosted the second most NCAA tournament games, even though it hasn't hosted one in over 60 years. KC hosted the NAIA National Tournament in 1954 from March 8th through the 13th. The championship game saw 9,500 people pack into Municipal. The next weekend, Municipal hosted the Final Four, where the LaSalle Explorers won their first and only NCAA National Championship, led by All-American Tom Gola, in front of a capacity crowd of over 10,000. But this was 3 days after that national championship game, and it was a two-game exhibition to be held at Municipal to end the college basketball season. The main event on March 22nd, 1954 was the East-West All-Star Game, a game put on by the Ararat Shrine Temple of Kansas City. It was a game where college's best seniors played against each other in front of NBA scouts that, because it was 1954, maybe hadn't ever seen them play before. The game featured Bob Pettit from LSU, who went on to have a Hall of Fame career with the St. Louis Hawks. The East team was coached by Hall of Fame coach Kentucky's Adolph Rupp. The game also featured Division I's greatest scorer, Frank Selvey of Furman. Selvey averaged 24 points a game as a sophomore and 29 as a junior. But in 53-54, his scoring skyrocketed, averaging over 41 points a game. Selvey did the unthinkable on February 13th of 1954, scoring 100 points in a single game against Newberry College. It's a feat that still, 70 years later, no Division I basketball player has accomplished. The East-West All-Star Game was the main event, but before that was the undercard, a game between Rockhurst University and Rio Grande College from Rio Grande, Ohio. Rio Grande had a star player that, believe it or not, was an even more prolific scorer than Frank Selvey. To understand Rio Grande's story, you have to go back to 1952, 2 years previous, when the college hired an alum by the name of Newt Oliver to run its basketball program. Newt had come from Wellsville High School, where he coached a 6'9" kid by the name of Clarence Francis, who averaged 32 points a game in his 1 year playing high school basketball. Clarence, or Bevo as they called him, followed Newt Oliver to Rio Grande College. In their first season together, the team went 39-0, defeating all comers, playing a soft schedule, but Bevo still averaged 50 points per game and even scored 116 in one game against Ashland Junior College. Now, other coaches were upset because Bevo and Rio Grande were putting up inflated numbers against poor competition. So that year it was determined that Bevo's 116-point record didn't stand because it didn't happen against a four-year school. So the next season, head coach Newt Oliver and his big man Bevo Francis were out to prove everybody wrong. Rio Grande, which was a school of only 92 students and 38 male students, didn't exactly have the best home arena. It was called the Hog Pen, and it had a leaky roof and a tile floor. Because of that, they couldn't get anyone to come play them at home, so they decided that they would go on the road, and they would play all comers at any arena, which would inevitably sell out for people to see Bevo Francis, and Rio Grande would get a cut of the ticket sales. They played schools like Miami of Florida, North Carolina State, Providence, Creighton, Wake Forest. They played in Madison Square Garden and in the Boston Garden, and everywhere was packed to see Bevo. Rio Grande and Bevo proved their head coach correct. They went 21-7 against that tough schedule, and Bevo Francis averaged 46.5 points per game, including scoring outbursts of 82, 84, and a magical night where he scored 113 points in a game versus Hillsdale College of Michigan. In March of 1954 in Kansas City, Bevo's team took on Rockhurst University in the 28th game of that 28-game road schedule. Bevo was actually playing hurt. He'd injured his leg before the NAIA National Tournament, and Rio Grande had fizzled out in the second round. 2 weeks later in Kansas City against Rockhurst, things still seemed amiss for the big man. He was 6 of 26 from the floor, only scored 22 points, and pulled down 9 rebounds. The game was tied at 50 late on when a foul was called on a Rio Grande player, and head coach Newt Oliver didn't think it was the right call. He jumped out on the floor and picked up a tee. After another foul on Rio Grande and another tee, Newt Oliver had a player also pick up a technical foul, and things were starting to get out of hand. In the last few minutes, Newt Oliver told his team to leave the floor. Over 10,000 people were in attendance that night, but nobody really cared that much about the East-West All-Star game after all the hullabaloo that Rio Grande College, Bevo Francis, and Newt Oliver had caused. Frank Selvey played pretty well in that All-Star game. He had a 9-year NBA career, and he was inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame in 2022. Coach Newt Oliver went on to coach the Boston Whirlwinds, which was one of the traveling teams that played exhibitions against the Harlem Globetrotters. Bevo Francis played for Coach Oliver with the Whirlwinds. He was drafted by the Philadelphia Warriors, but he didn't pursue an NBA career. Since 2016, the Bevo Francis Award has been awarded to the most outstanding small college men's basketball player. Rio Grande College is now University of Rio Grande. Its enrollment, once under 100, is now over 2,000 strong. To the best of my knowledge, the only time you could have ever bought a ticket and watched two guys who scored 100 points in a college basketball game play was on March 22nd, 1954 in Kansas City, Missouri. And that's what they were talking about in the papers on March 23rd, 1954.